Kevin.
My name's Kevin. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks, Ashley, for asking me. Anytime I'm asked to do anything for Alcoholics Anonymous, it's an honor and it's a humbling experience. Especially tonight. Tonight we're on the eve of the 83rd anniversary of Alcoholics Anonymous, and excuse me. It was when Bill sat down and talked to Dr. Bob on that Mother's Day, June 10th, 1935, and it was after he'd already tried to work with some guys up in New York, and Dr. Silkworth had told him, to maybe not preach to these guys, maybe just, identify a little bit of your story, and maybe you'll get through to them. So I'm going to try to do that tonight. I'm going to try not to preach. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about myself, what it was like, what happened, and what I'm like today. Little story, I did know that Ashley was going to be there at Bethesda House. I'd gotten the memo, and it was kind of an ego thing because I struggled with ego my whole life, but Ashley's grandfather, who'd been sober 50-some years, came to me and said, "Man, I got a kid for you to work with at Bethesda." He said, "I can't do a thing with him." So my head just got this big. I said, "Well, I'll cure him." So that wasn't the case. Ashley and I, we got to know each other, and actually when Ashley chose Jonathan as his sponsor, I thought, man, that boy, Jonathan's got his work cut out for him. So anyway, we do get to spend some time together, and I get to see him a lot, and I appreciate the way he's grown since he's been here. And they say in the book, that's one of the bright spots, watching some of these young people get it and grow up and see the light come on. I don't know if my tie's too tight or what, but I'm going to just loosen it up a little bit and try to get comfortable. Give God a chance to kick in here for a second. So, my sobriety date's January 26, 2007, and I'm a member of the Primary Purpose Group just on the other side of town, and I do have a sponsor, and I have the opportunity to sponsor other men as well. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. Started a long time ago. My family life seemed good early on. I didn't see a whole lot of problems, but thank you, Ash. I'll try that. Great, thanks. My parents were good, hard-working people. They didn't drink. They might have a little special occasion type drink, but there were never any parties. Or, my dad was a hard worker. My mom stayed at home. There were four of us. I had an older sister, an older brother, and a younger brother. I don't remember a lot about it, but my parents used to say that I was the one that was the agitator. I was always getting everything stirred up. I didn't really see it that way. Maybe took a little responsibility for that later on when after I got sober and had to try to find some of the causes and conditions for the way I behaved. My alcoholic behavior started early on. I think I was probably 10 years old when my dad came home and he brought a pony home, and all of us kids we took turns riding that pony, and by the end of the week, my brothers and sisters, they were tired of that pony. But me, I was making reservations for Madison Square Garden. I had got the ego. I was able to ride that pony and do a few things, and I began the ego drive that would follow me for most of my life. School, I was never the biggest, fastest, always kind of on the small side, always, taking a little heat. But the thing that I found out was that, that pony was something that was very exciting, to get on and then just go take off through the woods and be gone for hours. It was exciting to do. It was exciting to look forward to, and it kind of got me away. I didn't have to deal with people. Just something about it that we clicked. I don't know what that was. I still struggle with that today. Fast forward a little bit. I'm out of school. I'm 19 years old, and I haven't made it to Madison Square Garden, but I used to take that pony and I would jump all over the countryside. I'd be jumping things that, weren't supposed to be jumped, my brother's toys, the creek, anything that I could find. And, with aspirations to go forward. And I guess before I go too far, let me say, when I was 12, I realized that there were some consequences that went with that behavior. I was riding on a Sunday evening with some friends. It was, we kind of got a late start, but we were out there fooling around, and I had an accident. I broke my leg, really bad. And they had to leave me and go for help. And I spent a lot of time, there before any help arrived. And, I tell you that to tell you that was the night that I felt intense fear for the first time. I had been scared, a time or two before. I knew what it was like to play baseball and get hit with a pitch and have to get back up there and step in. And, that was minor compared to this. I was laying out there in the woods, and it was getting dark. And, I don't know that I was so much afraid that I was going to die, but I was afraid that I was going to lose my leg. It wasn't looking really good, and there was a lot of blood and stuff. And I was also afraid they weren't going to find me, that I was going to lay there all night. And I prayed. And, I'd been raised, I'd been to a little bit of church. I kind of wasn't forced to do it, so I didn't go. I did more church with friends and stuff like that. If I did a sleepover, friends would go to church. I had a little idea of what church was, and I thought that praying might help. And I felt intense fear that night, and they did come back and they found me, and they took me and they operated on me that night. I had a couple surgeries, but while I was in there, I had a spiritual experience, where I felt like that God was there, and that He was, His presence was there. It wasn't quite like Bill's, where I didn't feel the wind blowing through me. I just felt like I was being comforted, and I was going to be fine. I didn't know going into that surgery whether I was going to come back out with a leg or not, but I didn't think I was going to die. Woke up the next morning, there was cold plaster on my leg. I looked down, I had toes. I was happy, Did I have any gratitude? I did, but did I show it? I don't recall. I don't think that I, thank God, or, I just figured, well, I dodged that one, and, let's go from there. I mentioned a little bit about that spiritual experience, to some parents and maybe the doctor, and they thought maybe I was just in shock. so it was kind of like, well, I always felt there was a little something more than that, but I didn't really go out seeking it. I didn't put any action behind it, and my life went on. By the time I was 20 years old, I had graduated high school. I was in the jocks room at Delaware Park. I was one of the young steeplechase riders in the room, and there were some guys there. There were some Hall of Fame riders. There were some guys that I just knew that I was well above their capabilities. I was struggling to see where I could fit in, but I also knew that inside I was scared to death, and that if they knew how I was feeling on the inside, they'd realize that I didn't belong there and that I was just a pretender. A few years earlier, maybe a year and a half earlier, I'd started my career and started riding some horses, and I realized that, there was some anxiety involved, and, the entries would come out on Monday. We wouldn't ride till the weekend, and it would be all week long to look and see, where you were, what it looked like, and playing over and over in my head a million times what was going to happen. But I had a cousin, and she, she kind of introduced me to weed, and she told me that, this would help to relieve the pressure, let off the anxiety. And I tell you that to tell you that the reason I mentioned that in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, which I do qualify probably for other 12-step programs as well, but I'm here to talk about my relationship with alcohol, and I tell you that to tell you that when the alcohol was presented, I didn't have a second thought. My inhibitions had been let down because I had tried some other things, and they had shown me some relief. And when a fellow offered me some alcohol one day, it was a cold Sunday. It was raining. It was a miserable day. My chances of making it around were probably pretty slim. I wasn't going to win any races. I was going to be riding to survive, which sometimes was necessary. And when he offered me a little bit of brandy, and I took a couple pulls off that bottle, and a short while later, I started to get this sensation that, everything was going to be fine. I started to feel that little bit of ease and comfort that anxiety was gone, and I had found what I'd been looking for. That part that was missing. The one thing that I lacked. Sometimes I had confidence, sometimes I didn't, and this was what was going to get me over the edge. And two things came to mind that day. I didn't set the world on fire that day, but I did come to two conclusions that I was going to have some of that around when I needed it the next time. And number two, I wasn't going to tell anybody else about it, because I wanted to think that it was all me. That was my ego thinking that this alcohol is just going to make me bigger and stronger than I am. And for a while, alcohol did for me what I couldn't do for myself. I began to have a little success. I wound up riding for one of the bigger outfits that was around at the time, and I managed to be the top rider for those. And for a while, I had a lot of potential. Things looked good. The struggle that I had, and it kind of came early on, was that I struggled with the dosage. I had to be careful. I had to sometimes, we'd have to drive 3 or 4 hours to get to the race meet, and I realized if I started drinking too soon, I would be in bad shape by the time the horses came out, and I didn't want that to happen. That happened once or twice, and it happened a few times, and I started to try to wait as long as I could. If I just made it to the race course, I could sneak away, and then I started to add other things to it, because I knew, maybe I'll smoke a little before I get in the car for that 4-hour ride, and then I'll get there, and then I'll just have a little pick me up, and I'll be good to go. And I found out early on that it would be better to be a little over the line than to be a little behind, because if I didn't drink enough and that nervousness came back, it was like it was just eating me alive, until I got on the horse and everything, the adrenaline would kick in. If I was a little drunk, sometimes the adrenaline would overtake that, but it was always a crapshoot. I didn't know what was happening, and my behavior started to become a little erratic. I used to be able to get along with a lot of people. I started getting a little angry. I was, I was starting to blame it on the horse, or I would blame it on someone else, and it's a game of inches, and sometimes, you have the opportunity to put some people in some bad situations, and I was always, very aggressive, I was the young kid. I hadn't learned enough. I hadn't hit the ground hard enough, and, the old guys, they were a little cautious, but then they were a little smarter, and they were still doing it, so, but I didn't realize all that at the time. I was going to push the envelope, and, so I had potential. I moderate success. I paid the rent. I, made a little money here and there. Started to have a few consequences. I kind of overshot the mark one day and was leading the race, and we had less than a half a mile to go, and I forgot where I was going. I missed a couple flags. I made all the jumps. I thought I had it in the bag, and everybody was mad at me. And so my way of taking responsibility was for like having a bit of a tantrum in front of everybody that I was going to throw my saddle and things like that, and like they put the flag in the wrong place. But I struggled with that. I struggled with responsibility for a while too. I realized after several years of that my chances of getting rich and famous, which is what my ego wanted me to do, realized were probably a lot slimmer. My chances of getting killed were probably a lot higher, and I was going to maybe have to rethink my future. So I did what any good alcoholic does. I took my first geographical. I left Philadelphia and I went to New Orleans for the winter. I heard about Mardi Gras. I knew there was a track down there, and and knew that I could catch on. I knew I could find a job galloping some horses. I could, wouldn't have the pressures and everything would be fine. So that's what I did. I went down there with a buddy of mine, and I about starved for a month and a half. Nobody was really interested in help. Everybody was pretty well set, and so every day, I still didn't struggle. I wasn't a daily drinker at this time. I drank mostly weekends. Other stuff I did. I don't, I believe I had the alcoholism, but alcohol wasn't ruling my life. I made it there. I struggled for a while, and I caught on with a pretty good outfit. The lady there, she was young and smart and beautiful, and she had a nice stable of horses. She was from New York, and I thought, if I just hang around long enough, she'll realize that she can't do without me, and I'll be fine. So that was my next objective, and by the end of that meet, before we headed back north, I was working with her, and she was starting to see some of my good qualities. I was working on keeping the other ones hidden pretty well, and we came back to New York. Over the next several years, we got closer. She was successful. I didn't hold her back that much. My drinking progressed. My drug use progressed as well. I had a lot of parameters at that time. I had things in place that kind of kept me from going over the line. I got drunk on occasion. I got drunk times when I didn't want to get drunk. Life hadn't spiraled out of control. We were moderately successful, and she's talking marriage, maybe having some kids, and we're thinking that the gypsy life at the racetrack maybe isn't the way to go. So we relocated in the mid '80s to a farm down here in North Carolina. We had some money put together. It looked like one of those deals that was too good to be true. So we bought a farm down here and we relocated. Everything was good. We spent a winter here and realized that to make some money, one of us is going to have to go back to New York and continue running the stable. So she stayed here and I went north, and that's kind of when things started to progress. I got put in charge. I was the horses still ran in her name, but I pretty much was calling all the shots, and that ego thing was going out of control, and little success went to my head. Not so many parameters. My drinking and everything started to spiral out of control. I came back every winter for 3 years, and after that, we realized it wasn't such a successful venture as it was before, and I came back here, and that was the first time that she mentioned, that I might have a problem with drinking. I still didn't see that. It took me a long time to realize that. For the longest time, I thought I was just a heavy drinker and maybe had a little bit of a drug problem, and I kept that mentality for a long time. I went to a counselor, and she sent me to Alcoholics Anonymous, and my contact's actually in the room here tonight, and that was probably, I'm guessing, like 89, 90, 1990, something like that, and I came here for a while, and I stopped drinking, and I did a few things, and things got a little better, and I think what happened for me is that my ego would grow back before I got a chance to get enough work and enough serenity, enough sobriety behind me that I knew what was going on. I don't know if that was a blessing or curse. That was just the way it happened for me. I don't know that I was overly lazy, but when it came to working on me, I didn't really see the point. It was kind of funny tonight when Harrison was reading and he stopped at the third step. I did that for 10 years. And you were right, Harrison. That's what happened. I'd go back out the door and I wouldn't come back in for a long time. So it's kind of ironic that tonight that he kind of brought that back to me. I came here for a while and I listened to you guys and I realized that there was probably a good chance I was an alcoholic. I hadn't lost everything. I didn't really have anything except for a wife that had a lot of things. I didn't really have much. But you couldn't tell me that. You couldn't tell me much of anything. I went out, things got worse. I had a daughter that was born and tried to come back in. I had a son that was born, and I don't know if any of you have tried to raise young children and drink or be in untreated alcoholism. Well, that's where I was, and I wanted more than anything to be a good father. I just couldn't. Those kids would cry, and it would just be like a knife, and it'd be in my heart. And the first thing I would do is I would run. I just, I got to get out of here, and that kind of seemed to be my go-to. I came back and tried to get sober and got a little bit, I was thinking again, Harris, about when you were reading that, and it said, rarely has a person failed who has truly followed our path. And for me, it'd be rarely has a person failed who's done steps 4 through 12. I came back the next time and I got kind of hung up on the 4th step and had some stuff put on paper. Didn't tell it to anybody, and I didn't do a 5th step. And I came to meetings and had a little bit of clarity for a while, but went back out. It took a lot more than that for me. I came back. I tried to make an effort to help my wife with the kids. It wasn't really working. I tried to keep the farm going so that she could take care of the kids and we could still make some money and not lose everything. And I didn't do a good job at that. I wound up. I was early on. I was a bar drinker early on. I did a lot of stuff. I used to like to go out. When I came down here, I started drinking more at home. It was a long way. I live out near Camp McCall, like halfway to Laurinburg, so there really wasn't a whole lot going on out there. There were some clubs in Ador, but I didn't think I would be welcome there, so I didn't attempt that. I did buy things on the street, but I never got out of my car, but just saying. So my life, my life has spun out of control. I had burned it up. I had a wife, I had kids, I had a house, I had somewhat of a business. I was getting a little work done in the morning, get the horses out, and then I would return to this, I call it my workshop. It was a little 12 by 12 cinder building off the end of the barn where the tractors stayed, and I'd hide out in there. And I'd drink and I'd get high for the rest of the day, and I'd hope nobody came and knocked on the door. Because they never knew what they were going to get, Tried to do things with the kids and couldn't stay sober. Sometimes I'd be the fun dad. Some days I'd be the dad that yelled at everybody. Some days I'd be the dad that would embarrass them. And as kids get a little older, they start to feel feelings of embarrassment themselves. They don't want their parents doing it for them. And I did that. I continued to do that even after I got sober, but, for a little while. My January of 2007, New Year's had come and passed. It was January 2nd. My wife had come to me and she said that she was through. And wasn't really sure what that meant. So I asked her what that meant, and she elaborated it, that I was gone and I needed to find somewhere else to stay, and I needed to decide what I wanted to do. Did I want to get sober? Did I want to be a part of this family? If it was an ultimatum, it was that gift of desperation that eventually got me here. I didn't rush right out and come back. I knew you guys were here, but the thing that kind of hit me right off was the fact that now I can just relax. I can drink as I want. I don't have to be hiding and lying and I don't have anybody watching over me, and so that's what I tried to do. I tried to drink and do as much as I could over the next several days. But what really happened is I started to go crazy almost immediately. You know, my mind just started spinning out of control. I wasn't able to get drunk enough to stop the voices that were going on in my head, and you know, they were those ones that kept telling me, you know, you're such a big shot. You know, you're so smart. Look where you're at now. You know, your best thinking has gotten you right here, and you have no one to blame but yourself. And I couldn't quiet those thoughts. I mean, they might quiet for a while, but they would come back even louder, you know, as soon as the alcohol would wear off a little bit. My sobriety date's January 26th, so it took me almost 3 weeks to find my way back to a meeting. I suffered, but I began to realize that I wasn't the only one that had suffered. I realized that, you know, all that time I was all consumed with myself and how I was feeling and how things were going with me. I didn't realize how much trouble it was for my wife to take care of those kids and watch me run the business into the ground while I was running my life into the ground as well. You know, she's pretty resilient, and I guess I'm blessed in that aspect. You know, I've been given gifts and blessings my whole life, but I didn't acknowledge them until I made my way back here and did a little bit of work. I came back and I came to the primary purpose group, and I was welcomed in there with open arms, and a lot of the people were people that I had seen before, and they reached out to me, and they were surprised that I was gone that long, you know, because for some reason when I went back out, I don't know, maybe I was just a good liar, a good cheater, a good thief, but I was able to stay back out there and run for a while, but hopefully all that's behind me today. You know, I came back and I got a sponsor, and I began to do a little bit of work, and I went through the book with that sponsor and did what it said to do when it said to do it, and I let him read to me, and he told me he was going to read to me. I decided to let him be in charge, and I was going to follow his suggestions to the best of my ability, and that lasted for a little while too. I got through the steps. I was probably sober a little over 6 months when an opportunity came to take a few horses and leave town and go to Virginia. And he told me that he didn't think it was a really good idea, but I had burned so many bridges here, you know, and it was kind of a chance for me to make a little bit of a start, you know, maybe to keep from losing, you know, some of that. You know, the bank was looking for me. The IRS was, well, I should say us. It was my wife and I together. They were looking for us, and I thought that there was a chance if I could just, you know, make a little money, maybe, you know, stop the bleeding a little bit. And you know, my sponsor suggested that maybe it wasn't a good idea, but that if I did, there were some things that I needed to do. You know, I'd been through the steps. And I said, you know, I think I got this, but I really felt that I did, and I went there, and the first day I was there, I called the AA hotline that was up there, and then I got in touch with some people, and I started going to meetings right away. I was only there for a month that summer, but I went to meetings like 4 or 5 meetings a week. I got grounded in the program up there. You know, I did things, you know, they had like some things that they did, some cookouts and stuff over the couple weeks I was there. And I stayed sober, and I made it back here, and I carried on. I did the things that my sponsor suggested. I got to a year of sobriety. I started working with other guys. I took some commitments. The time that the next summer rolled around and it was time to leave again, I did the same thing. You know, I went up there, I got in touch with the same people, and I did the things that I did. So I followed that plan for the next 2 or 3 years, and I stayed active here, and I stayed pretty active up there. And the place where we went up there in Virginia closed down, so that forced me to come back here, and things still weren't really going well around here. So I found other avenues to make some money, but I tried to keep my program working. Took a few more commitments, and things were going along pretty smooth. Things started getting a little busy. My wife allowed me to come back. I was starting to do some things with the kids. My sponsor always jokes about some of the sponsees have soccer practice that they have to miss meetings for. Well, if anybody hears it, he's talking about me. I started to have other things that would come in the way of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had kids, and I had neglected them for so long. I felt the need to try to repair in a short version of time what I should have been doing for a long time. So I started putting a few things ahead of my program. I still stayed connected. I took a job where I was traveling, like Ashley mentioned, up and down. I was moving horses up and down the East Coast, and that'd take me away for 2 or 3 days at a time. So I wasn't able to fulfill some of those commitments. I had been the treasurer and things, and I had to kind of stop in midterm. So I thought, well, man, that's kind of tough. I don't know that I want to come back and take a commitment and have to give it up. So I was looking out for myself and my ego and how I felt, and I wasn't thinking that maybe they need someone to look after things and to help run the meetings. And I struggle with ego and self-centeredness all my life, and the book tells me that that's the root of our problem. And I had to also, working with that sponsor, I had to come to realize that I was an alcoholic. When I was working with him, we sat down and we went over that for the longest time, because I don't know that I ever really truly believed it. But the only one I had to prove it to was my inner self, and we talked about it. And I had that strange mental twist that when I wouldn't be drinking for a while, my mind would talk me into taking one. That it would be a good idea, when I knew on so many levels that it wasn't going to work. Situation would come up, and before I got sober, the further away I got from that drink, the crazier I felt. And then the other thing was that when I started drinking, that I wasn't able to stop. I didn't get drunk for every day for a week after I started. It was progressive. It took me a while. I had the benefit of being able to control it a little bit for a little while, but so I was able to come to terms with myself that I was an alcoholic, that I wasn't just a heavy drinker with a drug problem. So I'm about 5 or 6 years sober now, and I'm kind of drifting away a little bit. I'm still going to meetings. I'm still working with a few guys. Most of them aren't staying sober. Imagine that. So my sponsor, he takes me out. We have dinner one night, and he says, you're kind of drifting away. What's going on? And I said, well, I'm struggling to find the balance, between my life and sobriety. He said, well, do you want some advice? And my brain is screaming, no, 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 but my mouth says, sure, go ahead. And he says, well, balance isn't that big of a deal. He said, if you have a commitment inside the group, a commitment outside the group, and a new guy you're working with, you got all the balance you need. Everything else is just over here. So I thought about what he said, and and over time, it kept creeping in, So I would stay, I'd stay for the business meeting, and I'd see where there was something to do, and some job that needed filled, and I'd sit there and wouldn't raise my hand. And that voice would come back, and I should tell you that after a period of sobriety, there were a lot less voices in there, but every now and then, there were more than one, and now my sponsor's voice is added to that bunch too, and so I have the drunk voice over here, the sober voice, the sponsor's voice, and I'm starting to realize that if I don't quiet down these voices, sooner or later I'm going to drink again. So I raise my hand and I get a commitment. I raise my hand, I get another commitment. I said, well, what do I do outside the group? I said, I'm struggling to find something. I said, well, just go give blood or something, just make yourself useful. So it took a little while, but I found some outside things that I could do. Like Ashley mentioned, I have a lot going on today. I'm busier than I've ever been. The last few years have rolled by. Things have gotten better. My life's taken on a new meaning. I've started to see those promises come true. I'd like to say that I've done all the steps perfectly. I do everything perfectly. And I'm still working on some amends that I have. I'm still working on some monetary amends that I'm going to be working on for a while yet. Everything didn't get great. I wasn't able to keep that house. I was able to keep some land and have a roof over my head today. But I'm happier now than I've ever been. I've realized that money and material things are not going to make me happy. I get as much gratitude, helping someone else out and, doing something for someone, whether it's in Alcoholics Anonymous or not. And since I've gone through the book lately with some new guys, I see things that I missed. I see some of those promises that, there's one in Bill's story that says, the alcoholic, he's got to enlarge that spiritual, his spiritual connection, and it's not through prayer and meditation. It's through self-sacrifice and helping of others. I know I heard it, but I didn't know that it pertained to me. I continue to pray, several times a day, and morning and night. I pray on a daily basis. I still ride horses today. I don't get. I still get fear that. I'm smarter now, and I know that some situations that I can't control, and I know that some situations may be a little dangerous, and that fear will creep in. And I don't run from that today. I embrace it. It's a way for me to get a little closer to my higher power. I don't tackle those things alone today. I used to think my higher power, I kind of look up in the sun and think, my higher power is way out there, but he's a lot closer today. Most days, if I'm lucky, he's right in here. Sometimes I have to reach out and maybe pull him a little closer because I'm bad to want to take credit for things that go right. I learned a lot of things. I learned that today I have to expose myself to the truth no matter what the consequences. And the sooner that I do that, the more peace I'm going to have. I know that, today, I knew that I had the commitment to be here tonight. I know I got something going on tomorrow night. We have Unity Day tomorrow, and with a little luck, I may be able to spend a little time here. I get to go to Detox tomorrow. And I also get to see those guys that I meet in Detox show up here, and I get to welcome them to my home group when they show up there. And, I do that because I'm paying it back, but the gratitude comes after I do the action. I do the action and I'm driving home and I feel like, now I can, relax. I've done what I'm supposed to do and all is right. And, with me and the God of my understanding. And it just gets closer. And, we used to always read the page 100 out of the big book at the primary purpose group, and we since don't do that. And I remember when I went to Virginia, and I think in my second year there, they asked me if I'd chair one of their meetings, for the month, and so I chaired one meeting, and I asked them if they minded if I'd read that chapter at the end of the first chapter on page 100 about the new man. And I used to be able to recite it. I probably shouldn't do that tonight because I'll probably make a mess of it. But if you get a chance, read it. It says roughly that both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you do, things will be better than anything you could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power. You're presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. Ashley, thanks again. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you, Kevin.